Sure, here's an expanded version of that point in about 1,200 words. There is a fundamental misunderstanding in modern society about the nature of niceness and virtue. Many people, especially young men, have been led to believe that being agreeable, accommodating, and avoiding conflict is the highest form of goodness. They think that if they are just nice enough, they will be loved, respected, and rewarded for their kindness. But this is a deeply flawed way of looking at human nature, and it sets people up for failure in both their relationships and their personal growth. Niceness is not virtue. In fact, excessive niceness often stems from fear rather than strength. It is the fear of confrontation, the fear of rejection, and the fear of upsetting others. True virtue, on the other hand, is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to engage with it in a controlled and principled way. A virtuous person is someone who has the capacity for strength, aggression, and power, but chooses to wield those qualities responsibly. Simply being nice because you lack the courage or ability to do otherwise is not virtuous, it is weak. Imagine two types of men. One is overly nice, always seeking to please others, always avoiding confrontation, and always putting everyone else's needs ahead of his own. The other is strong, capable of asserting himself, and willing to stand his ground when necessary. Now, which of these men is more likely to be respected? Which of these men is more likely to protect his loved ones? Which of these men is more likely to succeed in life? It is, without question, the second man. The problem with niceness is that it often comes at the expense of authenticity. When someone is overly nice, they tend to suppress their own thoughts, desires, and opinions to avoid conflict. They tell people what they think they want to hear rather than what they truly believe. This is not honesty. It is manipulation disguised as kindness. It is an attempt to gain approval through submission rather than through genuine merit. And over time, people begin to see through it. Women, in particular, do not respect men who are overly nice to them. This is not because women are cruel or unkind, but because they are naturally drawn to strength, confidence, and competence. A man who is excessively nice is often perceived as lacking in these qualities. He appears weak, indecisive, and ultimately unattractive. Women do not want a man who tiptoes around them, constantly seeking their validation. They want a man who has his own sense of purpose, who can lead, and who is unafraid to challenge them when necessary. There is a biological and psychological basis for this. Women on an evolutionary level have been wired to seek out partners who can provide security, both physically and emotionally. A man who is overly nice and agreeable does not inspire confidence. He does not give the impression that he can protect, provide, or stand firm in the face of adversity. And whether they acknowledge it consciously or not, women instinctively recognize this. Now, this does not mean that a man should be rude, aggressive, or disrespectful. That is not strength. That is simply another form of weakness. True strength lies in balance. A man should be kind, but not at the cost of his integrity. He should be considerate, but not a pushover. He should be respectful, but not subservient. The key is to be assertive without being arrogant, to be confident without being domineering. Many men make the mistake of thinking that if they are simply nice enough, they will be rewarded with love and admiration. They believe that if they always say yes, always put others first, and never challenge anyone, they will be appreciated. But the reality is often the opposite. When a man lacks a backbone, people lose respect for him. They may take advantage of his kindness, but they will not admire him for it. This is particularly true in relationships. A man who is overly nice to a woman may initially be seen as sweet, but over time he will often be seen as boring or weak. A relationship thrives on mutual respect, and respect is not given to those who constantly bend over backward to please. A woman may test a man's boundaries, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, to see if he will stand up for himself. If he fails that test, if he allows himself to be walked over, she will lose respect for him. And this doesn't only apply to romantic relationships, it applies to friendships, workplaces, and life in general. People respect those who respect themselves. If you allow yourself to be treated poorly, if you never say no, if you always put everyone else's needs above your own, you are signaling to the world that your needs don't matter. And if you don't value yourself, why should anyone else? Being overly nice also breeds resentment. When a person suppresses their own needs and desires for the sake of others, they often become frustrated and bitter. They feel unappreciated and taken for granted. They may start to believe that the world is unfair, that people are cruel, or that they are being mistreated. But the truth is that they have allowed themselves to be treated that way. No one forced them to suppress their true thoughts. No one made them sacrifice their own well-being. They did it because they thought it would earn them love and respect, and when it didn't, they became angry. But this resentment is misplaced. The solution is not to blame others for failing to appreciate excessive niceness. The solution is to stop being overly nice in the first place. Set boundaries. Speak your mind. Stop seeking approval from everyone. It is not your job to make everyone happy. It is your job to be the strongest, most capable version of yourself. A man who has a clear sense of purpose, who is confident in himself, and who refuses to compromise his integrity is far more valuable to the world than a man who simply seeks to be liked. The world does not need more nice men. It needs more strong men. It needs men who can stand up for what they believe in, who can protect those they love, and who are willing to take responsibility for their own lives. If you are someone who has spent your life trying to be overly nice in order to be accepted, it is time to stop. Start respecting yourself. Start setting boundaries. Start prioritizing your own growth and development. The moment you stop seeking external validation and start valuing yourself, you will find that people treat you differently. They will respect you more, they will listen to you, and most importantly, you will respect yourself. Because at the end of the day, niceness is not virtue. Strength, integrity, and courage. Those are the true virtues, and they are worth far more than mere agreeableness. There is a harsh but undeniable truth that many men today fail to grasp. Women do not respect pushovers. This is not a criticism of women, it is simply an observation of human nature. Respect and attraction are deeply intertwined, and for a woman to truly respect a man, he must demonstrate strength, confidence, and the ability to stand up for himself. A man who constantly bends over backward to accommodate, who avoids conflict at all costs, and who suppresses his true opinions to keep the peace, is not seen as admirable, he is seen as weak. And weakness, no matter how well-intentioned, is not attractive. The problem with being a pushover is that it signals to others, especially to women, that you do not value yourself. If you are willing to compromise your beliefs, suppress your desires, and allow yourself to be treated poorly just to avoid confrontation, you are showing that you lack self-respect. And if you do not respect yourself, how can you expect anyone else to? Women are not drawn to men who crumble under pressure. They do not admire men who let themselves be walked all over. They do not dream of being with a man who is so desperate for approval that he will sacrifice his own dignity to get it. A woman wants to feel safe and secure with the man she is with. She wants to know that when the time comes, he will be able to stand his ground, protect her, and make decisions with confidence. A pushover cannot do any of these things. Many men believe that being excessively nice, always agreeable, and never standing up for themselves will make them more desirable to women. They think that if they just say yes often enough, if they always put her needs ahead of their own, and if they never cause any friction, they will be rewarded with love and appreciation, but reality does not work that way. Women may appreciate kindness, but they do not respect weakness. And without respect, there is no real attraction. This is why so many men who take the nice guy approach find themselves confused and frustrated when they are rejected. They do everything they think they are supposed to do. They never argue, they never challenge, and they always try to be as agreeable as possible. And yet, they find themselves being ignored, taken advantage of, or worst of all, hearing the dreaded words, "You're such a great guy, but I just don't see you that way." That is because relationships are not built on excessive niceness. They are built on mutual respect. And respect is not given to those who refuse to assert themselves. Women test men, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, to see if they have a backbone. This is not an act of malice. It is an instinct. A woman may push boundaries, make unreasonable demands, or challenge a man's authority in subtle ways. She does this not because she wants a weak man, but because she wants to see if he will stand up to her. If he does, she respects him. If he does not, she loses interest. This is something that many men fail to understand. They mistake these tests for cruelty or unfairness, but in reality, they are simply part of human nature. A woman does not want a man she can control. She wants a man who can challenge her, who can push back when necessary, and who is capable of making decisions without constantly seeking her approval. This is why so many men who start as nice guys eventually become resentful. They believe that they have done everything right. They have avoided conflict, been endlessly accommodating, and prioritized her happiness above all else. And yet they are still not respected, they are still not valued, and deep down they know it. This leads to bitterness, frustration, and in some cases anger toward women. But the problem is not with women. The problem is with the men who failed to command respect in the first place. A man who allows himself to be treated as a doormat is making a choice. He is choosing to prioritize comfort over respect. He is choosing to avoid difficult conversations instead of addressing them head-on. He is choosing to suppress his own needs and desires in the hope that doing so will earn him affection. But it does not. All it earns him is contempt. Some men make the mistake of thinking that if they just work harder at being nice, if they just give a little more, they will eventually be recognized and appreciated. But that is not how attraction works. Women are not drawn to men who are endlessly accommodating. They are drawn to men who have purpose, drive, and self-respect. Consider a man who always lets his partner make all the decisions. He defers to her on everything: where to eat, what to do, how to spend their time. At first, she might appreciate the control, but over time, she will start to see him as indecisive and weak. She will start to feel burdened by the responsibility of always leading the relationship. She will start to wonder why he never takes initiative, and eventually she will lose respect for him. Now consider another man, one who is kind but firm. He listens to his partner's opinions, but he is not afraid to make decisions. He respects her, but he also respects himself. He does not tolerate being treated poorly, and he is willing to walk away if necessary. This is a man who commands respect. This is a man who maintains attraction. The difference between these two men is not that one is mean and the other is nice. The difference is that one has a backbone and the other does not. And women recognize this instinctively. So what should a man do to avoid falling into the pushover trap? First, he must develop self-respect. This means setting boundaries and enforcing them. It means not tolerating mistreatment, even from someone he loves. It means recognizing that his own needs and desires matter just as much as anyone else's. Second, he must cultivate confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. It is the quiet assurance that comes from knowing one's own worth. A confident man does not need to seek approval constantly because he is secure in himself. He does not feel the need to be excessively nice to earn affection because he knows that his value does not depend on someone else's validation. Third, he must learn to handle conflict. Avoiding conflict is a hallmark of weakness. A strong man does not seek out unnecessary fights, but he also does not run from them when they are necessary. He is willing to have difficult conversations, to stand his ground, and to assert his own needs without fear. Finally, he must have a sense of purpose. A man with a purpose is inherently attractive because he is driven by something greater than the need for approval. He has goals, ambitions, and passions that extend beyond his relationship. This makes him someone who is worthy of respect and admiration. At the end of the day, the truth is simple. Women do not respect pushovers because no one respects pushovers. People respect strength, confidence, and integrity. A man who stands up for himself, who values his own opinions, and who is willing to walk away from situations that do not serve him is a man who commands respect. A man who sacrifices everything just to be liked, he will always be overlooked. Over-niceness is often seen as a virtue, but in reality, it is a ticking time bomb for frustration, resentment, and even bitterness. Many people, particularly men, are raised with the belief that being excessively nice, always agreeable, always accommodating, always putting others first, will earn them respect, love, and appreciation. They assume that if they never cause conflict, never say no, and never assert their own needs, they will be rewarded with admiration and affection. But the harsh truth is that this approach does not work. Instead of leading to happiness, it often leads to deep-seated resentment both toward others and toward oneself. Over time, the overly nice person begins to feel unappreciated, taken advantage of, and even betrayed. They may start to believe that the world is unfair, that people are selfish, and that their kindness has been wasted. But in reality, the problem is not with others. The problem is with the way they have chosen to interact with the world. The root of the issue lies in the motivations behind excessive niceness. While genuine kindness comes from a place of strength, over-niceness is often rooted in fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being disliked. Many overly nice people do not act this way because they truly want to. They act this way because they are afraid of the consequences of standing up for themselves. They believe that if they assert their own needs, they will be abandoned. If they express their true opinions, they will be disliked. If they say no, they will lose approval. This fear-based approach to life leads to self-sacrifice at an unhealthy level. Instead of creating genuine, balanced relationships, it creates one-sided dynamics where the overly nice person constantly gives while others take. At first, they may convince themselves that they are simply being generous, that they are doing the right thing. But deep down, resentment begins to grow. Overly nice people often find themselves in situations where they feel unappreciated. They go out of their way to help others, expecting gratitude and reciprocity, but instead they find that their efforts are taken for granted. They expect that their constant self-sacrifice will be acknowledged, but instead they often feel ignored. This is because when someone consistently puts others ahead of themselves, they teach people to expect it. They set a precedent where their needs always come last. And over time, people stop noticing their efforts. This creates a vicious cycle. The overly nice person gives and gives, hoping for recognition, only to find that it never comes. As a result, they begin to feel bitter. They may not express this resentment openly, but it festers beneath the surface. They may start to withdraw emotionally, becoming passive-aggressive or distant. They may feel anger toward those they have helped, blaming them for failing to appreciate their kindness. But the truth is that the problem lies in their own inability to set boundaries. One of the most damaging effects of over-niceness is the internal conflict it creates. When someone suppresses their own desires, opinions, and boundaries for too long, they begin to lose touch with their true self. They no longer know what they actually want because they have spent so much time trying to please others. They struggle with feelings of frustration, but because they have conditioned themselves to avoid confrontation, they do not express it. Instead, it manifests in other ways: depression, anxiety, self-doubt, or even sudden outbursts of anger. Over time, this resentment can poison relationships. When one person in a relationship, whether romantic, familial, or professional, consistently suppresses their own needs, it creates an imbalance. The other person may not even realize that there is a problem because the overly nice person never communicates their true feelings. They may think that everything is fine because no one has told them otherwise. Then, one day, the overly nice person explodes with frustration, and the other person is left confused, wondering where all this anger came from. This is a common scenario in romantic relationships. A man, for example, may believe that if he always agrees with his partner, always puts her needs first, and never expresses his own desires, he will be seen as the perfect boyfriend or husband. He suppresses his own needs for years, believing that his self-sacrifice will be appreciated. But over time, he begins to feel ignored, unappreciated, and even resentful. He sees his partner making decisions without considering his feelings, but he never spoke up when he had the chance. Eventually, the frustration boils over, leading to an explosive argument or even a breakup. The irony is that this outcome is exactly what the overly nice person was trying to avoid. They wanted to maintain harmony, to avoid conflict, to be liked. But by failing to assert themselves, they created the very tension they were trying to escape. In the end, their excessive niceness did not earn them love or respect. It led to resentment, both from themselves and from others. So how can one break free from this destructive pattern? The first step is recognizing that excessive niceness is not true kindness. True kindness is balanced. It involves caring for others, but not at the expense of oneself. It means being generous, but also setting boundaries. It means being considerate, but also being honest. Setting boundaries is crucial. Many overly nice people struggle with saying no because they fear rejection. But in reality, people respect those who stand up for themselves. When someone sets clear boundaries, they teach others how to treat them. They show that they value themselves, and as a result, others value them too. Another important step is learning to embrace conflict when necessary. Conflict is not inherently bad. It is a natural part of human relationships. Disagreements allow people to express their needs, clarify misunderstandings, and strengthen their connections. Avoiding conflict at all costs does not create peace. It creates suppressed frustration that eventually erupts. Learning to communicate honestly, even when it is uncomfortable, is essential for maintaining healthy relationships. Overly nice people must also recognize that their worth is not determined by how much they do for others. Many people fall into the trap of thinking that their value comes from their self-sacrifice. They believe that if they are not constantly giving, they will not be loved. But this is not true. A person's worth is not based on how much they please others. It is based on their character, their integrity, and their ability to be their authentic self. Developing self-respect is a key part of this process. People who respect themselves do not allow themselves to be treated poorly. They do not tolerate one-sided relationships. They do not suppress their true thoughts out of fear. Instead, they carry themselves with confidence, knowing that they are worthy of respect and that they do not need to earn love by sacrificing themselves. At the end of the day, over-niceness is not a virtue, it is a burden. It creates resentment, damages relationships, and leads to self-doubt. True kindness comes from a place of strength, not fear. It involves being honest, setting boundaries, and respecting oneself as much as others. By breaking free from the cycle of excessive niceness, a person can cultivate genuine, balanced relationships built on mutual respect rather than silent resentment. Strength, not submission, is what truly attracts others, whether in relationships, friendships, or life in general. Many people mistakenly believe that by being overly agreeable, constantly accommodating, and avoiding conflict at all costs, they will be loved, respected, and desired. They assume that if they make themselves easygoing, always saying yes, and never asserting their own opinions, they will earn the admiration of others. But this belief is fundamentally flawed. It is not submission, passivity, or excessive niceness that draws people in. It is strength, confidence, and self-respect. Attraction, both romantic and social, is deeply tied to respect. People do not respect weakness. They do not admire those who bend to every demand, who never push back, who never stand up for themselves. Submission, particularly when it stems from fear or insecurity, is not appealing. It signals a lack of self-worth, a lack of direction, and a lack of confidence. Strength, on the other hand, commands attention. It is a force that naturally draws others in because it demonstrates competence, independence, and resilience. One of the biggest mistakes people make, especially men in relationships, is assuming that if they do everything their partner wants, if they agree with her on everything, if they never challenge her opinions or assert their own desires, they will become irresistible. They think that by being the ultimate nice guy, they will be rewarded with love and devotion. But this is rarely the case. Instead of admiration, they often find themselves ignored, disrespected, or even resented. This is because attraction is not built on excessive agreement or unyielding compliance. It is built on respect, and respect is earned through strength. A person who cannot hold their own in a conversation, who cannot make decisions, who cannot stand up for what they believe in, does not inspire admiration. They do not create a sense of security or stability. Instead, they seem unreliable, weak, and ultimately unappealing. Women in particular are drawn to strength. This is not about physical strength alone, though that can be a component. It is about emotional and psychological strength. A man who knows what he wants, who is confident in his abilities, and who is unafraid to stand up for himself is naturally attractive. He does not seek validation through submission. He does not base his worth on how much he pleases others. He operates from a place of inner certainty, and that certainty is magnetic. Contrast this with the man who constantly seeks approval. He is hesitant, always looking for signs that he is doing the right thing in the eyes of others. He avoids difficult conversations because he fears conflict. He prioritizes making others happy over asserting his own needs, believing that this will make him more likable. But instead of appreciation, he often receives indifference or worse, disdain. This is because he does not command respect, and without respect, there is no real attraction. Strength is also essential in the way a person handles challenges. Life is filled with difficulties, financial struggles, career setbacks, personal conflicts. A person who crumbles under pressure, who complains but takes no action, who blames others instead of taking responsibility, is not seen as admirable. They are seen as weak. On the other hand, someone who faces challenges head-on, who remains composed under stress, who finds solutions instead of excuses, this is the person who is admired and respected. This applies in relationships as well. Women want to feel secure with their partner. They want to know that if things get tough, he will not break down, panic, or give up. A man who submits too easily, who avoids confrontation at all costs, who is always waiting for someone else to make decisions, does not create that sense of security. Instead, he creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is the opposite of attraction. Strength is not about aggression or dominance. It is about confidence, assertiveness, and the ability to handle life with poise. A strong person does not need to demand respect. They naturally earn it through their actions. They do not need to control others. They control themselves. They do not need to seek approval. They know their own worth. Another key aspect of strength is independence. People are drawn to those who have their own lives, their own goals, their own ambitions. A person who is entirely dependent on someone else for their happiness, their decisions, or their sense of self-worth is not attractive. Clinginess, desperation, and a lack of personal drive are all symptoms of submission, and they repel rather than attract. Think of the individuals who inspire admiration. Are they the ones who constantly seek approval, who never challenge the status quo, who always defer to others? Or are they the ones who stand their ground, who pursue their goals relentlessly, who carry themselves with confidence and certainty? The answer is obvious. The world does not admire submission, it admires strength. This principle extends beyond personal relationships. In the workplace, for example, the employees who are most respected are those who take initiative, who contribute ideas, who are willing to challenge the status quo when necessary. Those who simply follow orders without question, who never voice their opinions, who never assert themselves, are rarely seen as leaders. They blend into the background, unnoticed and unappreciated. In friendships, the same dynamic applies. A person who always agrees, who never pushes back, who always follows instead of leads, is not seen as someone of high value. They may be tolerated, but they are not deeply respected. True friendships are built on mutual respect, and respect is built on strength. So what can someone do to cultivate strength? First, they must develop confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. It is the quiet assurance that comes from knowing one's worth. A confident person does not need to beg for approval because they already know they are valuable. They do not seek validation through excessive niceness because they do not base their self-worth on others' opinions. Second, they must learn to handle conflict. Avoiding conflict is a sign of weakness. A strong person does not look for fights, but they are not afraid to engage when necessary. They stand up for themselves. They express their opinions honestly. They are willing to say no when something does not align with their values. Third, they must cultivate independence. A person who has their own goals, their own ambitions, their own passions is naturally attractive. They do not rely on someone else for their sense of purpose. They create it for themselves. This makes them more interesting, more compelling, and more desirable. Finally, they must set boundaries. Weakness is often a result of allowing others to take advantage, to overstep, to push beyond what is reasonable. A strong person knows their limits and enforces them. They do not allow themselves to be manipulated, guilt-tripped, or coerced into submission. At the end of the day, the truth is simple. Strength attracts. Submission repels. People admire those who stand their ground, who have conviction, who carry themselves with confidence. They do not admire those who constantly seek approval, who bend to every demand, who avoid confrontation out of fear. To be respected, to be admired, to be truly attractive, one must cultivate inner strength. This does not mean being aggressive or domineering. It means being confident, independent, and willing to stand up for oneself. It means knowing one's worth and refusing to compromise it for the sake of approval. It means embracing one's own power rather than giving it away. And when that strength is fully developed, attraction, respect, and admiration follow naturally.